Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tree Preservation Order Subcommittee. I'm Councillor Phil, I'm Chairman of the Development Committee at Sedgemoor, and will be chairing this panel. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. I've not been advised of any planned fire drills, so if alarms go off, then please follow us out to safe exits of the building. If anyone's got mobile phones with them, if you could please just turn them to silent or turn them off, just so they don't interrupt the meeting or the sound system. We've obviously got an agenda that we'll be following today in terms of our discussions of the tree preservation order we're discussing today. What I thought I'd do before we start, just so that everyone knows who's here today, is just a few introductions. As I said, I'm Councillor Phil, I'm Chairman of the committee, of the Planning Committee and of today's subcommittee. Tony, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chairman. Tony Grimes, I'm Councillor here, and I'm sat in this committee meeting today. Thank you.
Alistair.
Sedgemoor District and Somerset County Councillor Alistair Hendry for Permanency and Highbridge.
Thank you.
Steve Taylor, Committee Manager.
Nigel Osborne, Legal Advisor to the committee.
I'm Jeanette Burton, I'm the Council's Landscape Officer.
Would like to introduce Mr. Phillips.
Yes, I'm Peter Phillips. I live nearby the site.
Thank you very much.
I made the original representation requesting a tree preservation order be made.
Thank you very much. So we'll have a sort of a format that we follow with these meetings. Just on the agenda, we have an item for urgent business. There isn't any other urgent business covered by our agenda. Second item is declarations of interest for members. Are there any declarations that you need to make on this particular application?
No.
That's fine. So we move on to the actual tree preservation order for West Huntsville number 1 2021 that is outlined on our agenda. So the format we'll sort of follow with today is there will be initially a presentation. I think I'm flashing here, but I don't know that's going to cause me a problem. There is we'll have a presentation from the landscape officer about the background of the application, why this is here and the circumstances. Once that presentation is finished, then there is the opportunity to question from the panel our landscape officer. We'll then come to you, Mr. Phillips, and ask you to make your comments. And again, after you've done those, there'll be an opportunity for members of the panel and our legal representative to ask if there's any other details that we need to get from you that we don't feel that we've quite understood. After that, we'll go back to the landscape officer to sum up, in effect, what's been said. And again, there is an opportunity to ask questions of the landscape officer, and then we'll come to the panel, who will then make their comments and make their recommendation as to whether we go ahead with this order or whether we do not. Okay. So if we start off with Mrs. Burton, would you like to give us the introduction as to why we're here and what we're doing?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
So, following a request from a local resident, we were asked to assess the trees to see whether they merited protection under the under the tree preservation order regulations. The order relates to a block of woodland located on land to the south of number 1 Church Road, West Huntsville. And the reason why we were asked to assess the trees was they were considered to be under threat, as the property is now vacant and on the market. It was on the market or is still on the market, and the particulars relating to the property mentioned that the grounds of the property had potential for development. So there was a concern that, if the site was going to be developed in the future, then the trees may be at risk of being removed to facilitate any development on that site. So I went to the site and had a look at the trees. We have to, when we're assessing trees, we have to demonstrate that there is public benefit, that the trees have significant amenity value to be worthy of consideration for a tree preservation order. So I went into the site, had a look around the site to to see what condition the trees were in, and there was nothing to suggest that the trees were structurally unsound or anything like that. So I then viewed the trees from various public vantage points around the site to see what contribution to the landscape they made. Now we have a set methodology for assessing trees, which I followed, and this is Appendix D, which you've probably had a glance at prior to the meeting. We have to take into consideration various criteria. We look at their size, their life expectancy, their form, how visible they are, whether there are any other trees in the area, whether they're suitable to the area. We also have to take into consideration their future amenity value, and also their influence on structures, so how close they are to a property or dwelling. We also take into consideration things like underground overhead services as well, their impact on that, because the utilities companies have got statutory powers to cut back trees from overhead lines, so you have to take that into account as well. And we also look at other factors like how rare the species is, whether they screen an unpleasant view or have any historical association, what their wildlife value is, and whether they are veteran trees as well. So I went through and scored. We have a scoring system on each of these criteria, looking at the size, the large trees, and you look at them as a whole, as one block in the landscape, really. The life expectancy now is just poplar trees within this block of woodland. Poplars don't tend to be long-lived species. For example, like an oak tree will live much longer than a poplar tree. But still, I assess that they probably have between 15 and 40 years left in their lifespan. Obviously they are prone to sort of strong winds being out there, but I couldn't see any excessive wind blow or anything like that within the block of woodland when I went there. They all seemed pretty sound. And they have been planted quite close together when they were initially planted. So their form, when you look at them as individual trees, aren't fantastic because they've all gone up for the lights. So, what should normally have happened in a block of woodland like this was you probably would have gone in and thinned them out a little bit, but they obviously haven't. The person that owned them just planted them and left them to grow. But there's nothing to say that they can't go on for quite a long time. And if somebody in the future wanted to thin them out, then we would assess that at the time and see how appropriate that was. Now, in terms of visibility, this is the important factor, and one that is being really put forward as an objection, really. One of the main objections to the order is their visibility. When you look at the trees from Paulet coming down the A38, the trees do form a very they contribute quite an important feature in the landscape, I felt. They're very visible from the A38. You can see them also from the Environment Agency car park, which is used by the general public, walkers, and they do provide a good screen to the village of West Huntsville on the approach down the A38. So they scored quite highly. Well, I gave them 2, which maybe is not a very high score, but because from Church Road they are blocked. The views of the woodland are blocked by other trees that are existing on the frontage of the site. And there are quite a lot of other trees in the area, you know, surrounding the site. But they're suitable species for this location. They're very salt tolerant, so I would imagine the winds in this area are quite heavily laden with salt coming across from the west, and probably that's why they were chosen to be planted as a good screen along the boundary of the site. And I think, you know, their future potential for amenity, you know, we've got another 40 years probably with these trees, maybe even more. All depends on climatic change, really. You know, but they were all in good condition. There was no signs of any disease or anything to worry about. You know, so in total, the trees scored 16 points, and 15 merits inclusion, 40 for consideration for TPO. So we served the TPO accordingly on the landowner. Unfortunately, Mr. Mullins can't be here today, so should I just read out his objection? Would that be? I think that would probably be.
Yeah. That would be helpful.
So he has an objection to the tree preservation order because he doesn't believe that the existing trees add anything to the local amenity of the area. As far as I can tell, trees are hardly visible from Church Road and partially visible from Paulet Road near number 1 Paulet Road, the southernmost half of 5 Paulet Road and the rear of 6 Paulet Road. From spring to autumn, the poplar trees are obscured further by the foliage of trees on the northernmost boundary of 1 Church Road and the trees along Paulet Road. To the south and west of the poplars is agricultural land. And then he goes on to say that he confirms that he's responsible for the property at 1 Church Road and the adjoining land. And yesterday I did speak to Mr. Mullins because he phoned me just to say that he couldn't be here today, and he also raised concern that the trees may devalue the land because it's for sale, but you know, but in situations like this, you know, the local planning authority does have a duty to protect trees in the interest of amenity, and on all development sites, you know, if there are prominent trees, then we will assess them accordingly to see if they meet criteria for protection and retention. So that was Mr. No, I mean, what I'll just say is that obviously members have been out to site and had to look for themselves to view the trees from publicly accessible vantage points. You know, if this site were to be developed, what I would say is they provide really good screening and enclosure to any, say, somebody came in with, you know, wanted to build a couple of self-built properties, then they will provide good enclosure, and you know, I don't think that the trees would prevent completely developing the site, in my view. I mean, obviously there's other planning considerations to take into account, but you know, in terms of there would be room just to get a couple of properties in there perhaps in the future, so I don't think it's going to be a complete, you won't be able to develop, and we will assess any application on its merits should it be submitted in the future. So just to conclude, you know, confirming the order would guarantee the retention of the trees within the woodland. This means that the council will control any future works. So if the landowner wanted to do any felling or pruning of the trees, then they would need to submit an application, and that will be assessed by us, and we will control any works and put conditions on to make sure that any works are carried out to the professional arboricultural standard, so that, you know, this woodland is retained into the future. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to echo what Mrs. Burton said, the part of it's obviously disappointing that the objector wasn't able to make it today, but I think the fact that obviously the objector put in his objection to this being served is why we're here today, and the whole thing is being heard, so that that is being taken into account. And as Mrs. Burton mentioned, the members of the panel have been out and visited the site. We have looked at it from various vantage points, including the EA car park that was mentioned, the White Cottage Old Pollitt Road vantage point, and also Church Road along various parts of it to see the impact it has. And members will report back on that later. But I think hopefully the objector will be reassured that even though he isn't able to be here, his views are very much being taken into account. And literally, as I say, the reason we're here is because of his objections. So that's allowed us to take this all into account. Members, are there any questions that you wish to ask Mrs. Burton on her presentation that she's made so far? Councillor Grimes?
No, I don't think so. I think the site visit showed us exactly what we needed to look at, and I think we'll draw our conclusions after that.
Councillor Henry, any questions from you at this stage?
No, absolutely nothing. Quite happy with the presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Osborne?
Not having visited the site, how close are they to the nearest property?
They're at least 100 metres at least from number 1 Church Road. I mean, and behind the property itself, there is an orchard which isn't in great shape. So, you know, they're plenty far enough away. They're not going to fall on this house.
Thank you very much. Okay. Right, so if we move to in effect, the next part of our meeting is the ability of the members of the public to raise their points. As we've heard, the objector is not present. Mr. Phillips, would you like to give us your information on why you're supporting the serving of the TPO?
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
I made the original request to Sedgemoor to make the tree preservation order, and a copy of my original report, part of the second email I sent this at Appendix C, along with the estate agent's particulars, which I live fairly close to the site, but going to join it. And in the estate agent's particulars, there was mention of promotion of the site for self-built housing, and a pre-application had been made to Sedgemoor, it says. And obviously that's not a public document, so I don't know what terms that was in. So I, at that point, raised concerns about the extent that the development might mean, because the woodland isn't really mentioned in the estate agent's particulars. It's fleetingly mentioned, but it doesn't actually refer to where the development would be. One can only assume that it's the whole site that was being promoted. I did ask for other trees to be put into the order, and the landscape officer found that they weren't of sufficient health to warrant inclusion, and I quite accept that. I haven't been into the site because it's private land. So I just wanted to say that from as far as the visual amenity side of things, which is the important issue with the tree preservation order, as you well know, it's downplayed by the objector for obvious reasons. And I would refer you to the estate agent's particulars, which are with my Appendix C, where the site is described as being 5 acres in extent, and there's also a reference to the pre-application on the first page there, and on the second page of the estate agent's particulars, just above the inset map, it says Orchardly is subject to an overage of 20% in the sales particulars, so in the sale contract. So the objector does have a peculiar interest in getting as much development on the site as they can. But as the officer has said, there is quite a big site, and if some limited development were permitted, obviously a bigger development could be permitted and would supersede the tree preservation order as planning permission does. But there is plenty of room on the site if some frontage development were considered, although it is outside the development envelope of the village. And I think only the self-built housing is permitted under policy at present. The other thing I would say is that there's a buzzard's nest in the woodland, and that the woodland is, if you look at the officer's pictures at Appendix E, the ones on page 19, they show the view from the Environment Agency car park, which you would have seen if you've been to the site. That view is maintained from the car park as you walk down to the Slowway Lane Bridge. You can see that view for the whole way down, and from the Burnham House Hotel, walking back down Slowway Lane, you get that view all the way down there as well. There's also, I had a quick drive around this morning just to check, from Toilet Road, which is, if you go up past the crossways and then turn right, you get the view back, and you see the woodland as the edge of the village from that point, and through all the Environment Agency land, which goes down to the A38 and then goes down to Slowway Lane and then on down to the sea wall. You get the view of the woodland for most of that as a walker or a horse rider or a cyclist, which is very well used now in these areas are. So I just wanted to say that the objection plays down the amenity value considerably, and also pointed out the pecuniary interest that they have still. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. Again, members, any questions that you have for the speaker? Yeah, Councillor Hendry.
Not for the speaker, sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know it was for the speaker.
No, we'll come, if you hold on to those, you've got a chance to come back to the officer again in a moment. Well, any questions that you have? No, I think that's very, very clear. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Yeah,
just
go
say
ahead.
one more thing.
Yeah, absolutely,
Sorry.
no problem.
About the longevity of the trees. This is a woodland order, and this is the only classification in a tree preservation order, as I understand it, that covers natural regeneration and any new planting. So that would automatically, if a tree falls over, poplar tree will spring back up again. And if there's a woodland management plan in operation, which could be approved by the council, then any new planting under that would automatically be covered by the order. So it could be that the Forestry Commission would want to see a reversion to more mixed woodland, and that would be, I think that would be a grant available for that, and would also would be acceptable under the tree preservation order as a management plan.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, in the procedure that we've got here, we now have the opportunity, in effect, for summing up and taking forward. So if I can come back to Mrs. Burton, you have the opportunity to sum up and make a final comment.
Just respond to what Mr. Phillips just said about future sort of management of the woodland. If we confirm this order, then the block of woodland will be totally under the control of the council. If somebody wanted to fell the trees, they would have to submit probably a felling licence to the Forestry Commission, but they would consult with us because if it became TPO'd. So we would be a consultee on that, and we would make appropriate comments to that. It is quite correct, Mr. Phillips is quite correct in saying that if trees came down and there was natural regen, that would be generation of trees, then that would be covered by the order in the future. So anything that grows up is covered. And we, obviously, if the site was developed, then we would be probably looking, well, we'd be saying that the existing trees would obviously need to be, we would condition that the trees were retained and managed appropriately, and we would be asking for management plans for the future management of the woodland. We would condition that on a consent should the site be developed. Also, you know, when planning applications are submitted, we also ask for surveys of the trees to be submitted in support of the application up front these days, and we will be identifying root protection areas to define an exclusion zone in proximity to the trees, so that, you know, their health wouldn't be affected by any development, or the location of the dwellings and any services that were put in would have to be outside those root protection areas. So that is some information that we would be requesting if a planning application came in, and that would be carefully assessed to make sure that the woodland wasn't affected in any way in the future. So obviously, you know, my view is that these trees have got significant amenity value, public amenity, and that's the important thing. Their removal would have a significant effect on the environment, and therefore I'm requesting that members consider confirming this order at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Phillips, is there anything you want to say as a final comment?
No, thank you.
Okay, that brings us then back to members. Any questions you have for either Mr. Phillips or?
No, it's not actually a question that's been answered already, but I would have said something else, but it's not a question.
That's right, you I'm coming to you for that in a minute, so we'll get there. Okay, Tony, anything from you?
No, nothing very much.
Okay. One thing, just if I can, just to clarify, I think where we were talking earlier on about the likely lifetime of the trees being limited because they're poplars, from what's been said in effect, because we're looking at the woodland as a whole and that can be regrowth, that lifespan in effect is ongoing, because we would be expecting new growth to be coming through and replacing any that are dying out through old age.
That's right. I mean, if the order's confirmed, then we would have power to ensure that replanting is carried out under the regs. Should, you know, the woodland, should felling have to take place for, you know, say we had a really big storm and lots of trees were lost and that they had to do some thinning, we would be conditioning that replanting was carried out, and that may be that we introduce other species in there, which, you know, would be an appropriate course of management in the future to get the diversity of species improved throughout that woodland. In my view, that would be a good management technique.
Okay, thank you very much. So that moves us on to us as panel members. I'll ask each member if they can give their sort of views, and then we'll discuss those if we find that we need to. So I'll start with Councillor Grimes for your comments as to what you've seen and heard.
Thank you, Chairman. As you said, after a site visit, we looked at this area from many different positions. And on this occasion, my conclusion is I totally agree with the landscape officer for the reasons given in the report, and I think that's about all I've got to say on this matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Okay, I went through this actually in quite some detail. The landowner considers that perhaps it would devalue his land if his trees are in situ. That's not a reason of any consequence to us here. Nothing. That doesn't come into it. If you put out a questionnaire to the people of Sedgemoor to ask specifically about these trees, if they should be kept or cut down, I think they'd be overwhelmingly come back and say in favour and say no, they should stay there. Now, I was out on the site visit too. The trees actually, everyone's used the word beautiful is a bit cheesy, but in actual fact, it's a beautiful block of trees. It takes many, many years for something like that to be established. The landowner, I don't know the chap, I've got no connection in any way, but he should consider himself that the trees have been there longer than him. Really, that is a major factor there. And if he wants to build on the land, whether it be self-build or maybe through, I don't really know, no, that's up to him again. He should take into consequence that the trees should stay. He should make the application around that and go forward from there. But for so many reasons that have been outlined anyway regarding wildlife, etc., all this kind of, no doubt in my mind, I agree with the case officer that these trees should remain in situ. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, as other members have said, we went out on the site visit, we looked at it from the various vantage points. I think, in my own view, this blocker tree does make a huge impact on the character of that area. And you can't, I mean, it is a very significant impact when you're stood in any of those areas. Particularly, we obviously looked at it from there, say the EA and the White Cottage sort of area. But it was interesting going down Church Road as well, because when you start going down Church Road, yes, there are some very mature trees on the sort of public open space. When you get beyond the pump, the but on that public open space where you've got more area that people can congregate, it has a real impact on you there because it's slightly less treed on that particular part. So I think it does have an impact on the let's say the character and the amenity that of anyone who's in that area. As was mentioned by my colleagues, it is a substantial area and of mature trees, which isn't something you can replace overnight. And so I think it would be a great impact. And as a landscape feature, because there are so many trees there, it is more than just the one tree. It is a significant impact on the landscape. So certainly in terms of all the visibility aspects that we have to look at, it certainly makes that case. We've said because of the size of it, it does have that wider impact that you maybe wouldn't have with a smaller tree or an individual one. Benefits for present and future is something we're supposed to look at. And I know we're specifically today looking at visual amenity and the sort of character, but the ecological impact of losing that, I think, would be a major thing. And we're all very interested in the climate emergency and climate change. As again was mentioned by one of my colleagues, I think the public would be slightly surprised if in the current climate we were looking at losing this sort of area and not protecting it. So I think again that for me is a reason to look at it. The trees do have an intrinsic value. We mentioned the importance of wildlife, and as been reported, there isn't a dead, dying or issue with that particular area, so that is something we don't need to worry about at this stage. And we've heard that they will be able to regenerate as they are protected as a woodland. So from all the criteria we have in front of us, the scores that we've seen and our own visual impact that we've seen from our site visit, I would have to agree with my fellow colleagues that this is certainly an order that I would want to see confirmed. And so I'm looking for a proposal from the members. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, after all that's been said and looked at, I'm happy to move the landscape officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
And just to confirm, that is to confirm the tree preservation order on this site.
It certainly is. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you. Happy to second this, Mr. Chairman. No doubt in my mind whatsoever these trees have to stay in situ as planned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In which case I'll ask members to indicate their support for the recommendation that's been moved and seconded, which is to confirm the order that is before us today. All those in support, please show. That is unanimously carried. And so that tree preservation order is confirmed, and so we will make sure that is in place and done. Thank you very much for coming along today. Everybody who's been here today, can I thank you for your involvement. Can I thank you, Mr. Phillips, for obviously raising this originally with your drawing it to the attention of the council. I think it's well worth us having had a look at this in the climate. So thank you ever so much, and I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you.